Just a quick heads up for our longtime listeners who are wondering where diversity stories went and what this new Radio ArtEZ is doing in their podcast app. I'll explain everything in the intro, I promise. But check this out. This is episode 1 of Radio ArtEZ, a podcast by Studium Generale ArtEZ. So, welcome to Studium Generale's newly rebranded podcast, Radio ArtEZ. Yeah, so we changed the name because in this new season, we will go beyond stories of diversity and bring you a podcast about agile thinking and the power of the arts. We'll delve into relevant questions of today and broadcast diverse voices from multiple identities, perspectives, and experiences. We'll make room in this podcast for personal stories and urgent research by ArtEZ students and staff and recordings of Studium Generale events. So it's a bit different, but not that much. We're just broadening our scope. If this is your first time listening, you can go back and listen to the first 2 seasons we did called Diversity Stories. They're still up in this feed. So you could see this as season 3 of Diversity Stories, only with a different name, but you could also see it as a fresh start. The first episode of Radio ArtEZ. So you might wonder who I am. Well, my name is Dennis Gaans, and you might have heard my name in the credits before. I used to produce Diversity Stories, and now I'm also hosting Radio ArtEZ. So in this first episode of the 3rd season, we will take a look at the hashtag. In the closing weeks of last semester, we were visited by Elizabeth Losh, who talked about the subject at length. And to introduce Elizabeth, I sat down with Studium Generale's programmer, Rana.
So my name is Rana. I'm one of the cultural programmers at Studium Generale ArtEZ, and I'm also a tutor.
Yeah, I was wondering, do each of you have special focuses?
We do. We work on various actually programs. So we initiate and develop several programs, and currently, or we have already for a fairly long time, a line on feminism. And we have a feminist reading group. I'm at the moment working on a film series dedicated to artists, theorists, activists, or designers who, through their work, refute the utopian logic of petrocapitalism. And it's called How on Earth.
Sounds interesting.
I hope so. Yeah. No, I think it definitely is actually. Yeah, because of the people who are involved. Yeah.
And just before the end of last year, you invited Elizabeth Losh to come and speak?
Yes, we did. So we had a very nice opportunity to invite Elizabeth Losh to our school. She's a media theorist and a digital rhetoric scholar. And interestingly, she explained to us, she didn't try anything, she explained to us what it means to study the hashtag, not only from the perspective of Silicon Valley or as just merely a digital code which you could use, but to think about what it does and how it functions and how it can mobilize people online, but also offline.
To give you a little bit of background, I'm a former co-facilitator of a feminist collective called FemTechNet. It's a group that brings together feminist science and technology studies with feminist media arts practice. And one of the things we're interested in is the ways that we can kind of counter some of the myths about technology and the sort of Silicon Valley ideology that often promotes the idea that technologies allow us a kind of transcendent, disembodied, highly rational, labor-saving, universal, transparent, and neutral experience, when in reality, you're always interacting with the embodied materiality, the different kinds of effective labor, and the ways that you're always kind of situated in a context in which there are a lot of unspoken assumptions and values. Now, one of the things I like to do, I've been looking at these cases where people try to kind of create these well-designed explainers about hashtags, and the ways that they kind of propagate particular kinds of myths about hashtags. And I'm interested instead on kind of how we can think about the hashtag as a designed object in a kind of messier, more ambiguous way. So like, what does it mean to get for a rapper, Dappy of the group N-Dubs, to get a hashtag tattoo so his face stays trending forever? Like, in what ways, what does the hashtag mean to him in that particular context? I'm also interested in hashtag invention myths. So anytime that I hear a story that a white male inventor invented something, I always become very suspicious. So this is my nemesis. His name is Chris Messina. He claims to be the person who invented the hashtag. So he points to this tweet from August 2007, where he says, how do you feel about using hashtag pound for groups as in hashtag barcamp? And to me, that's an annoying claim because the hash symbol was being used in internet relay chat for many, many years before that to separate people into groups. And the ways that people actually ended up using hashtags were very different from the way Messina imagined them. But I'm also interested in how people use the hashtag for political rhetoric. And one of the things I tried to do in this project is look at a couple of different national contexts for case studies. And so I looked at 4 different kinds of strategies using the hashtag that's the name of a person, hashtag that's the name of a place, hashtag that's a slogan, and hashtags that are brands.
So in this item, we will focus on the third strategy, the hashtag as slogan. So here's Losh reading from her new book about the hashtag, followed by a Q&A with the wonderful researcher, curator, and cultural organizer, Margarita Osepian, and the audience.
So strategy 3 is make up a slogan, and I'm just going to read a little bit from this, and then I'd like to kind of open it up for discussion, because I don't want to, I think people probably have a lot to say. Okay, here goes. A hashtag can tell people what to do. It can present an order, request, or instruction. Hashtag Pray for Orlando asks the faithful to remember the Florida city that was victimized by a gunman in their devotions. Take a Knee urges protest during the U.S. national anthem at sporting events. Stop Separating Families commands immigration officials to respect the kinship units of the undocumented. Demand Voter ID directs citizens to perform gatekeeping at polling places. Save the NHS begs British citizens to preserve the national health system. A hashtag can issue a command without specifying a precise activity, as the popularity of the Nike slogan, "Just Do It," shows. A single word may be sufficient. Hashtag Resist rallies opponents of the Trump administration. The hashtag Leave and hashtag Remain hashtags were used in the debate about severing or maintaining Britain's connection to the European Union. Of course, sometimes people don't want to be told what to do and resent not being presented with choices. The certitude of a directive may be ridiculed if the demand seems unreasonable. The hashtag Dress Like a Woman, paraphrased from a command from Donald Trump about preferred workplace attire, was paired with pictures of female astronauts, surgeons, and legislators. Hashtag Tell Dave Everything sarcastically suggested that personal secrets should be shared directly with the former British Prime Minister if he supported government-run surveillance issues. A hashtag can also tell people with more subtlety what to do. It can suggest a seemingly reasonable way to think and feel about the world. It can present definitions, comparisons, and theories about causality, as though these logical suppositions should be treated as unquestioned premises. For example, a hashtag can assert a positive affirmation about equivalency. Hashtag Love is Love. Worth. Hashtag Unborn Lives Matter. Or acceptance. Hashtag Refugees Welcome. Hashtags can also insist upon basic conditions in negative terms. Hashtag not in my name renounces political violence in India. Hashtag no bill, no break is an ultimatum about gun control legislation coming to the chamber floor. Hashtag no justice, no pride adopts a similar template to insist that LGBTIQ basic rights must be addressed before being co-opted by feel-good pride celebrations. Most importantly, a hashtag can assure people that they are connected to other people. A hashtag affirms that a communication channel is open, that being heard is possible, and that an interdependent web of social ties between equally viable nodes can be made visible for navigational purposes when necessary. A hashtag promises that the preconditions for amplifying a collective signal have come into existence. This is why expressions of solidarity are often so important for hashtag slogans. Critics may denigrate such purely affirmative gestures as empty acts of clicktivism or slacktivism with no long-term political impact, but the call and response structure that magnifies a hashtag's impact represents much more than a simple repetition of the same idea. Obviously, few hashtags explicitly take the form of a question, such as, "Where are the children?" or "Are we Europe?" Yet any hashtag always poses a question awaiting an answer from an audience. The question that the hashtag poses is, are you listening? Are you there? In addition to providing metadata that allows computers to sort through online conversations more efficiently, hashtags with slogans are speech acts that use language to attempt to bring a new order into existence. So academics use the term speech act theory to explain the power of words to perform actions. Such word combinations don't just describe the world or comment upon it. They actually transform the world like a magic spell that can reshape reality with a simple incantation. Judith Butler uses the example of a doctor announcing, "It's a boy," or "It's a girl," upon the occasion of a baby's birth as a speech act with profound consequences. Butler insists that gender is not a fixed biological category. Rather, gender is an interpretation of a social script that is acted out for audiences. The words of the obstetrician or midwife may set the stage, but other actors, including the baby, have important roles to play. Each promise, excuse, or recitation of a creed can reconfigure the child's initial gender or challenge its stability. Butler has a theory of performance for political demonstrations as well, that assumes that exercising assembly may be more important than exercising speech. According to Butler, when today's masses congregate in the streets, the precarity of their bodies becomes visible. By appearing in public together, demonstrators also resist dominant ideologies of self-sufficiency, personal responsibility, and individual enterprise. They announce themselves as a plural rather than singular political body. For Butler, these acts of assembly do not depend on verbal utterance. A silent candlelight vigil may speak volumes. Hashtag slogans may contain speech acts that seem similar to the chants heard at live protests, but they operate in another register as well. Because they are aggregated for searching and browsing, hashtags gather in online environments. They have a quantitative as well as qualitative existence. If search algorithms and communication platforms facilitate their appearance, hashtags enter the space of visibility. Using Butler, it's possible to argue that hashtags perform the work of assembly as well as the work of speech. The "we" of a hashtag slogan expresses this plurality. Whether the compact of unity is enacted explicitly with plural first-person pronouns like we, us, or our. So, for example, a hashtag bring back our girls universalized the outrage felt by many Nigerians and citizens around the world after 276 female students were abducted from the Chibok government secondary school by Muslim fundamentalists. The hashtag Girls Like Us hashtag was started by transgender activist Janet Mock to promote positive visibility for transgender women. Many hashtags signal shared investments no matter the grammatical construction. If the call requires joint effort, for example, standing with is a gesture of solidarity. So for example, hashtag We Stand With Paris, hashtag We Stand With Brussels and hashtag We Stand With Berlin, express camaraderie with cities that have experienced terrorist attacks. Similarly, hashtag I Stand With Planned Parenthood imagines a stance of collective defense that assumes others will take the side of a U.S. reproductive rights organization. And hashtag I Stand With Survivors announces a firm commitment to join rape survivors in adversarial legal processes or attempts to shame them into silence. In these cases, the I of personal accountability represents a pledge to membership in the we of a communal movement. The hashtag #MeToo campaign has encouraged women from many different walks of life to share their experiences of harassment, assault, discrimination, and marginalization. The initial viral spike observable in the United States for the hashtag #MeToo hashtag was soon replicated in the data about social media trends from other Anglophone countries. Hashtag #MeToo was also translated into multiple languages or adapted for foreign audiences. In China, the homophone Me Too, represented by the emojis for rice and bunny, was used to get around the nation's censors who might be searching for subversive content. In France, an open letter critical of the movement from successful show business figures called it by its English name rather than moi aussi. As a testament to its popularity and brand appeal, by January of 2018, hashtag #MeToo had a custom emoji that appeared automatically if Twitter users inserted the hashtag. The image was intended to be 3 hands from people of different races, although at a distance, the symbol appeared to many to be an image of female genitalia. So that's a kind of cautionary emoji design story, I think. Many solidarity hashtags represent political choices as binary, as though the categories and the privileged and the oppressed never overlap. These tensions are best epitomized by the bitterly ironic slogan, hashtag solidarity is for white women, which galvanized Black feminists who were exhausted by what they saw as the patronizing, dismissive, or self-aggrandizing stances of white feminists that were adopted at the expense of their non-white sisters. This hashtag drew attention to the problem of claiming one affirmative identity, feminism, without acknowledging how practices of exclusion are tied to more problematic identity categories, such as racism. The hashtag calls out how the inclusiveness of solidarity in defending a perceived ally could ignore the pain of those relegated to the positions of outsider. Membership may be contested, but by memorializing people, landmarking places, reciting slogans, promoting brands, and planning events with hashtags, as political, social, and economic life is being conducted both online and offline. Metadata has become how people communicate. Marshall McLuhan insisted a half century ago that the medium is the message. Now metadata is the message.
We talked about this a bit over email, but you mentioned, we're talking a bit about digital pedagogy and your work in like online education. And then you mentioned hashtag syllabi.
Yeah, I have I've written a little bit about hashtag syllabi. So I'm really interested in hashtag syllabi. So things like the hashtag lemonade syllabus, Charleston syllabus, Trump syllabus, and Orlando syllabus. Mm-hmm. And I specifically interviewed people who were involved in the Brexit syllabus, including Rupika Rassam, who I think did a really nice job talking about the ways that as a teacher, as a pedagogue, hashtags gave her an opportunity to communicate with other people who were trying to teach political subjects in real time and sort of respond to sort of the shock of Brexit passing. And, you know, what's a way that people can kind of get away from this sort of immediate affective response and also integrate a little bit of interpretive academic work for context setting, and the ways that knowing something about critical race theory or post-colonial theory might be really helpful to not only students but to learners outside of the academy. And I think that, you know, the ways that she talked about how a hashtag syllabus also encourages interdisciplinary collaboration, so that there could be people who do political economy, people who do history, people who do literature, people who do film, who are all trying to kind of help people understand Brexit. Another person I interviewed was Marcia Chatelain, who designed the Ferguson syllabus. And it was really interesting the ways that she talked about how, as an academic, she really wanted to communicate with the public and sort of share teaching out in the real world, and thought that like aggregating some of these texts would be really helpful for regular people who were trying to, essentially think about things like how songs and how movies can sometimes help you understand a political event. But she felt like, as an academic, that work was often devalued. It was seen as non-scholarly, non-intellectual. Oh, it's just social media. It's not anything important. So I think really, I think that labor needs to be recognized in the academy, because there are people who do all of this maintenance of intellectual networks through social media, and they are performing important intellectual labor for the academy, and it's often undervalued. I mean, I often write letters, tenure letters for people, where it's irritating that there's these academic products that get valued more than sometimes the work that someone is doing, creating a whole field, and sometimes using social media to create that field. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it opens up a lot of...
and I think Nishant Shah has been somebody who's certainly used social media to really facilitate important intellectual and academic discussions. And that a lot of these discussions wouldn't exist without, I think, some of these channels and some of these facilitators. But it's not enough to have the platform. It's like the labor of facilitating the conversation is, to me, the thing that's important. So, like, it wasn't just that Marcia Chatelain came up with #Ferguson syllabus, and that was, she had to invite people into the conversation. She had to keep it going. She had to facilitate it. And
is that the reason why you make a distinction between who invents a hashtag and who takes care of it?
Yes. Because I think a lot of times with technology, there's this desire for these invention myths. Like, the story of a technology is someone creates a technology and they are the inventor and they get all the glory. And I think that's a nonsensical way to view the how people interact with technology.
And how do you see, like, with these hashtag syllabuses, how do they usually get spread? Is it just online? Does it start in like the academic sphere and then move out?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is then there's a second step of curation. So some of these hashtag syllabi have actually become books. So, for example, the Charleston syllabus has now become a print anthology that actually was published by an academic press. And in the case of the Brexit syllabus, they found that it was becoming sort of so large that it wasn't a manageable reading list for someone to come to, and that some of the works were too theoretical for average people to actually read. And so they had to go back in, and Tanisha Taylor, Hannah Clutterbuck-Cook, and Rupika Rasam did a lot of work as kind of editors, because they had to go back in and create a website that would more realistically, and you see that they used both Google Docs and a Zotero group to try to kind of narrow down sources once they had aggregated them. So there is a lot of labor that then goes into that curatorial work. And I think that often in meaningful community source digital pedagogy, that curation step is often undervalued. Because there can be a lot of, when you put out a call on social media, you'll get a lot of great stuff back, but then someone has to go through it and curate all that material.
I want to go back for a second to this idea of caretaking that Rana brought up, that you were also talking about, like that it's not just about putting the hashtag out into the world, but there's all this invisible labor that has to happen. So maybe you can talk a bit about like also the maybe like hijacking of a hashtag or misinformation, or what you called hashtag spam.
Yeah.
Which is like sort of what I think about sometimes when I think about hashtags, which is like, people that hashtag every single word in a giant, massive paragraph on Instagram.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a place that and since I have slides of these, I'm showing them. So this example, right, where she's like, this is hashtag spam. This is Louise Linton. And she's got hashtag day trip, hashtag Kentucky, hashtag nicest, hashtag people. But she also has these brand hashtags too. And I mean, this is what Instagram encourages, is this kind of hashtag spam behavior. Now, of course, people roasted her for this.
She was setting herself up.
She was really setting herself up. And then, of course, you can see she responded back with like a really rhetorically unwise response. And she ended up, deleting this and, making her account private and having to really walk this back. But talking to Crystal Abaddon, who was talking about, so there is all this hashtag spam. But what's interesting is that a lot of these people, so she studies Singapore influencers and the ways that they use hashtags. And she was arguing that in this world of hashtag overload, a lot of influencers are now trying to make hashtags rare rather than popular. So what you try to do is you actually try to, sometimes you use hashtags that are really only intended for yourself. But that you might actually use hashtags that are invisible so that only the cool people know where to go to find the hashtag. So like she explained it, okay, the cool people are using hashtag A, and then they start switching over to hashtag B once like lame people get on hashtag A. And then they're on to hashtag C, which is actually not on a hashtagable space. It's like on a blog that doesn't use hashtags to aggregate information. So only the cool people know about hashtag C, D, and E. And so they can show that they're in group, they're using this sort of exclusive language because only they have that knowledge. And I think the other kind of behavior that I'm interested in is hashtag hijacking. Mm-hmm. So Manicure Monday was a hashtag that was being used by nail artists. And so they would show off their nail art using this hashtag Manicure Monday. Now, a scientist named Hope Jaron, white feminist, thought she was doing a good thing, started to use Manicure Monday for images of scientists doing different things with their hands. And so she thought, oh, this is going to appeal to young girls. They'll see us, calibrating scientific equipment or, gathering samples or doing all of this stuff with getting our hands dirty in science. And we'll show them that our hands aren't just for narcissistic, exhibitionistic, feminine purposes. Well, the people who were using Manicure Monday got really pissed off. A lot of them were women of color. They were using Manicure Monday as a way to advertise their nail art services. They were entrepreneurs, but they also had their own sort of social norms within themselves. They were sharing with each other. And suddenly all these white scientists are like coming in and hijacking their hashtag. And they are PO'd. And I also think there are cases where, like in the Cancel Colbert hashtag case, where sometimes, so this was a case where a group of Asian American activists used the Cancel Colbert hashtag to try to get the show to acknowledge its racism. And my informant in this case was a woman, Eun-Sung Kim, who uses the hashtag, and I'm going to say it wrong, klepsydrus. It's a Greek word. And it actually means, it's these containers that they used to use in ancient Greece this was how long you could speak in a public setting. So it was essentially like Ignite talks, right? So it takes about 6 minutes for this, for the water in the first container to empty into the water in the second container. So it's like super limited short speech. Just like Twitter, you only have 140 characters in the beginning, and now you have 280. Like, how do you make the most with this like little? So she talked about the ways that the people behind Cancel Colbert got this terrible blowback and actually received all sorts of racist and misogynistic threats, and ended up Sui Park, who started the hashtag, actually had to go into hiding. So anyway, so these are, I was trying to kind of, the hashtag as a designed object is not something that's easy to control. I think designers often have this sort of fantasy that you can like make this beautiful typographic thing that will have this kind of pure, exalted life. But the reality is that people will try to hijack a hashtag. They'll try to, one of the things that I'm interested now is how people are using hashtag bash the hash or fashtag. So these alt-right groups are actually now mixing hashtags with Nazi imagery to try to actually discourage people from using hashtags at all, sort of to undermine the work of that hashtag convention by making it associated with something abhorrent.
What, like, does automation have a role in this? Like, I think when we were seeing, like, the Instagram thing, like, you often see people posting, like, a bunch of hashtags in the hope that bots will come and like their post. And also with, like, when a hashtag is taken over, like, troll farms, for instance,
exactly
play a role in that.
Yeah, for me, the thing that's interesting about hashtags is, okay, we had this long history of human-to-human communication around metadata, right? Where we all agree when we sort things and file them, we're going to call them a particular thing. Like, if we all live in Arnhem, we're going to call this Arnhem, right? That's going to be the geographical name. We're going to agree together to call it that, right? We have these agreements among humans. Machine-to-machine communication is also made possible by metadata, right? So that hashtags allow machines to communicate with each other too. And so we have this kind of unique opportunity with the hashtag to think about how not only humans are communicating with humans, but every time we use a hashtag, we're giving a machine a command, right? Aggregate this material together. So we're not only speaking to the human, we're speaking to the non-human. And so I think that that's why that kind of long history of the hashtag is interesting to me. Because again, if you go back to the teletype machine, the hashtag symbol was really important for machine-to-machine communication, even before computers, when you were using the teletype apparatus. So yeah, this kind of non-human, and it allows us to think about, I say, it lets us think about what machines are saying behind our backs. Like, because hashtags are code that we can read, right? We know that data is being aggregated. We know we've given Twitter a command to aggregate that data for us. So we know it's kind of like code that's going to be read by humans, but also by machines. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally. And it's like, I think it's like interesting at this point that like the communication has become opaque. Like, I think at one point I was discussing with a friend whether a bot had responded to his tweet or like an actual person, and it was like it took us several minutes to find out and like go like watch the account. And yeah, not, like, especially when you say like about the history, it's interesting that it's become human machine communication on like super twisted level somehow.
Yeah, there's actually an app called Photorloo that you can feed pictures in, and it will automatically generate hashtags for you. And so I took my faculty ID picture and fed it into Photorloo, and it was like hashtag glasses, hashtag suited up, and hashtag girls who do fun stuff. So it's trying to both. Because it's like a funny program because it's both trying to identify what's in the picture using machine vision technology, but at the same time it's also trying to generate hashtags that will be popular and sort of effervescent and fun. So, yeah. It's a weird world.
Do you see the hashtag as a public space itself? Because you talk in the book about I mean, of course, we talk about like the digital public sphere and its relationship to the public, to the place of the square, like the public square, for example. Then I was wondering if you see the hashtag as a public space or the hashtag as an element that sort of circulates in the public space.
So I do have a kind of like a serious message toward the end of the book that I try to kind of hammer home a couple of times, which is that, okay, hashtags are optimized for searching and browsing, but the algorithms that control the hashtag's visibility are being controlled by these companies that have surveillance capitalism as their business plan. Mm-hmm. And so what counts as trending on a hashtag isn't necessarily its popularity. And the algorithms that determine what hashtags are visible and which ones are invisible, those are manipulated algorithms. And so people have a sense that they can create a conversation. They have a sense that they're creating this kind of public square when they use a hashtag and sort of invite other people to use this hashtag. But those digital results in the stream are manipulated by third parties. And I think the fact that the tools that allow you to analyze how hashtags become visible, the fact that those tools are being bought up by big Silicon Valley companies, like that's the serious message, is that don't overestimate the power of individual users because a hashtag can feel very empowering, but the ways that results are being, like if you look back to the history of the teletype machine, you can see a particular hole in the teletype tape that represented the pound symbol. Like you know how that's being used because it's an analog technology that's easy to see how it works. But how hashtags are brought up, I mean, this is Zeynep Tufekci's point in Facebook versus Twitter and how hashtag Ferguson affected Ferguson, right? How, because of the ways that Facebook operates, it was actually hiding posts about Ferguson because it knew that, that's not the kind of thing that they make money off of. Which is why something like Photoroo is funny because it creates these hashtags that it thinks social media will like. Mm-hmm. But I think hashtags do create this communicative space, and people can use communicative spaces for conflict. They can use them for solidarity. It's a community. They can use them for self-promotion. Like when you have a communicative space, you've designed the space, but your ability to control what people do in that design space. They can do all sorts of things. And I mean, that's the same thing with, when you create an art experience, right? People can do different things in that you can't always stage manage how people will respond to something.
So that's it, the first episode of Radio ArtEZ. We hope you liked it, and we will be back next month with stories from honor students. Radio ArtEZ is a podcast by Studium Generale ArtEZ. It is hosted and produced by me. My name is Dennis Gaans. I have a little company called Ondercast, and our lovely tune, which has been with us since the beginning, is by Daan van Haaren. Feel free to subscribe and rate this podcast, but also if you want to get in touch and contribute something to this podcast, you're more than welcome. All the relevant links are in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and until next month, this was Radio ArtEZ.